Coming up on The World Today. Women's charity dump rotten fruit outside New Scotland Yard. As World Economic Forum closes, progress has been made on war, climate and recession, says its president. British nurses took to the streets across the country this week as they pumped up their pay dispute with the government, calling for pay rises in line with soaring inflation and vowing to come out on strike again next month if no agreement is reached. Hundreds of nurses gathered in front of a hospital gate in London before they marched to number 10 Downing Street to voice their demand for an enhanced pay rise to keep up with runaway inflation. According to the Royal College of Nursing, RCN, the real-term salary of British nurses has dropped by 20% in the past 10 years, resulting in huge staff shortages across the National Health Service. There were a record 47,000 nursing vacancies in England between April and June last year alone, 20% more than in the previous year.
So I've had newly qualified nurses who have just started, and many of them fear that they won't be able to continue nursing within the year because they won't have enough money to be able to pay their rent and to be able to pay their electricity bills. We've got nurses who, in the trust definitely, who are using food banks and who can't afford to run their home.
And now some updates to the Davos meeting, which is wrapping up today. The International Monetary Fund, IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva has said that the economic outlook was less bad than feared a couple of months ago. Ms. Georgieva said that the war told a panel of the World Economic Forum annual meeting that what had improved was the potential for China to boost growth, and that the IMF now forecasts Chinese growth of 4.4% for 2023. She said, however, she saw no dramatic improvement in the current IMF 2023 global growth forecast of 2.7%. She said that the war in Ukraine remained a tremendous risk for confidence, particularly in Europe. Speaking at the same panel, Bank of Japan Governor Haruhiko Kuroda said the central bank would continue its current extremely accommodative monetary policy to achieve its 2% inflation target in a stable, sustainable manner.
My message is it is less bad than we feared a couple of months ago. But less bad doesn't quite yet mean good. Now, with the reopening of China, we expect growth this year to again exceed global average. We project 2.7% for the world. This may be corrected somewhat in a couple of days. For China, we project 4.4%. The horrible war in Ukraine is a risk for primarily the people of Ukraine, but it is also a tremendous risk for confidence, especially in Europe.
I don't think the decision taken by the board last month was not wrong, perfectly right, and we will continue the current extremely accommodative expansionary monetary policy in order to achieve 2% inflation target in a sustainable and stable manner.
I think that we need to have a global approach. That's a good thing that the United States of President Biden have decided to invest in the green industry and have decided to accelerate the fight against climate change, and Europe must do the same thing. But if we want to compete, we need to have a very strong, effective, efficient, swift European industrial policy.
We're staying with Davos. World leaders and economic actors made progress on the world's most important issues at the World Economic Forum. That's according to the conference's president. The 5-day marathon of panel discussions and talks in the Swiss ski resort united 52 heads of state or government, 19 central bank governors and over 600 CEOs. Attendees were able to advance on talks on employment of Ukrainian refugees and to reiterate support for reconstruction action in the country. He said avoiding a recession and building a solid growth agenda was critical, and that leaders doubled down on speeding up efforts on climate action amid calls by climate activists for WEF to stop any new fossil fuel investments.
Over the past several days, progress has been made on scaling climate ambition, driving more equitable growth, and unlocking the benefits of frontier technologies. For me, the greatest lesson of the week has been that although the world is more fragmented today, it does not need to be tomorrow. By coming together like this, we can shape a more collaborative future. And we also paid attention to the war during this week, and leaders discussed how to scale up the labor market integration of Ukrainian refugees based on new lessons from the forum's Refugee Employment and Employability Initiative. And the forum continues to support the dialogue between private sector leaders and Ukraine's political leadership to support reconstruction efforts. Avoiding a recession and building a solid growth agenda is critical, and it is doable to stop the fragmentation of the global economy. Hence, the forum launched a Future Growth Consortium to champion a new framework for growth this week. More than 350 million people are being reached with better skills, jobs and education through commitments made as a part of the forum's reskilling revolution.
And we're back in the United Kingdom, where protesters from Refuge Today placed thousands of apples outside New Scotland Yard, the headquarters of Metropolitan Police, to represent police officers who have been or are currently under investigation for misconduct. Ruth Davison, Chief Executive Officer of Refuge, said the scale of offending at the Met was deeply troubling, and that the 1,071 apples represented officers who had been accused of serious allegations, including domestic abuse and rape. The protest comes after a serving London police officer earlier this week admitted to carrying out 24 counts of rape in a near 2-decade-long campaign of abuse against women, making him one of Britain's most prolific sex offenders. The Metropolitan Police and the country's prosecution service said David Carrick, 48, had used his position of power to control and intimidate his victims, telling them no one would believe their word against that of a serving officer. The Met Police, already grappling with a collapse of confidence among the public after a string of scandals, apologized for failing to spot the pattern of abuse earlier.
It is deeply, deeply concerning that this scale of offending is happening within the police force. The abhorrent story of David Carrick that we've all had to read about this week is really, really shocking. For 2 decades, he got away with offending and serious crimes against women and girls with seeming impunity. We're told time and time again it's just one bad apple, but the reality is it's far, far more. And now every single officer in the country is being re-vetted. I think these are essential steps because women and girls have to feel safe that the person we go to when we report a crime against us is not a criminal themselves. We have had broken promise after broken promise, inquiry after inquiry. What we have not yet seen is any action that is making a difference. Last year I was here outside the Met and they committed to making crimes against women and girls like domestic abuse the strategic policing priority, but nothing has changed and still we are seeing criminals within the force getting away with their crimes with impunity. We're saying today there has to be a zero tolerance approach to this. You have to immediately suspend any officer and put them under investigation if there is an allegation of this kind of crime against them. How on earth else are we supposed to feel safe to go to the police when we need them?
Shut it down! If we don't get it, shut it down! Climate justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Climate justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Climate justice! When do we want it? Now!
To more stories now. Google's parent Alphabet Inc. is eliminating about 12,000 jobs, or 6% of its workforce, the company said today in the latest cuts to shake the technology sector. Sundar Pichai, Alphabet CEO, said in a staff memo shared with local news that the company had rapidly expanded headcount in recent years for a different economic reality than the one we face today. The cuts come days after rival Microsoft Core said it would lay off 10,000 workers. Alphabet's job losses affect teams across the company, including recruiting and some corporate functions, as well as some engineering and product teams. The layoffs are global and impact U.S. staff immediately. Alphabet has already emailed affected employees, the memo said, while the process will take longer in other countries due to local employment laws and practices. And we're off to New Zealand, where Maori leaders believe that it is high time for someone in their community to take on the role of the Prime Minister in the country after Jacinda Ardern announced that she will step down. Raewyn Bana, who is the manager of Aotearoa Violence Family Network, added that a Maori Prime Minister can ensure equality and diversity for everyone. Ms. Ardern said on Thursday that she had no more in the tank to continue leading the country and would step down no later than early February and not seek re-election. Her decision to step down is seen by some Maori community leaders as the right thing to do given her young family. Ardern's Labour Party has been struggling at the polls. A taxpayers' union courier poll released today using research from before Ardern's announcement revealed Labour's popularity fell to 31.7%, while the opposition New Zealand National Party saw support from 37.2% of respondents. Still to come on the programme. South Korean residents hope for shanty town development. We have that story and an update on the fire today on Humanitarian. Welcome back, and we're off to Somalia, where the number of reported disease outbreaks and climate-related health emergencies in the Greater Horn of Africa have reached their highest ever level this century, deepening a health crisis in a region where 47 million people are already facing acute hunger. Most parts of the region are battling the worst drought in at least 40 years, with an unprecedented fifth rainy season failure now anticipated, while other parts face flooding and conflict.
Somalia is facing one of its worst droughts. As a result, many people have completely lost their livelihoods and coping capacities and are relying heavily on assistance to meet basic needs. Baidoa district in the southwest state is one of the areas most affected by the current drought, hosting a second largest population of internally displaced persons after the capital city, Mogadishu.
Baidoa is one of the two districts in the states that have been on high alert for likelihood of sliding into full famine because of the protracted conflict. We have mass displacement of population, and when we talk about this recurrent drought, what the world is not able to comprehend is that we deal with the same caseload of people every year. So successively, they are losing their productive assets, losing their livelihoods, and becoming poorer and poorer with every drought event.
Through its network of local rapid response teams and community health workers, the World Health Organization is providing an integrated package of health and nutrition services for the most vulnerable people in Baidoa. The teams also focus on raising health awareness among vulnerable and displaced populations. Due to the persisting drought, many people lost their livelihoods and were left with no choice but to leave their homes in search of humanitarian assistance, often walking for days to reach the camps.
In our view, it is part of the bigger problem of climate change and global warming. And unfortunately for us in this part of the world, we seem to be paying the biggest price in terms of human casualties, in terms of our ability to fight hunger and poverty. And this way, then we are at risk of missing the achievement of sustainable development goals by the year 2030.
Rapid response teams and community health workers come from the communities they serve and are key to delivering services where insecurity and drought prevent people from accessing health care.
Well, staying with healthcare, this time in Nigeria, the healthcare system will ultimately become a center of medical excellence with a major investment deal coming to the country through the establishment of the Africa Medical Center for Excellence, AMCE. Chairman, CEO, Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, Honorable Abike Dabiri-Erewa, stated this in Abuja while receiving the CEO, AMCE, Mr. Brian Diva, and his team, who paid her a courtesy call in her office. Noting that a number of Nigerian professionals in the healthcare industry were beginning to invest in the sector in Nigeria, the NIDCOM boss said that with the volume of medical facilities planned for the center, it will go a long way to reducing brain drain of medical professionals.
We should be proud of who we are as a people and the talent and brains that we have. Now, what we are trying to do is what we're going to do with you. How do we harness all this to the benefit of our own home country? So I'm proud of our brothers and sisters everywhere. They just need a better environment, and it's being created by government. And I'm sure in the next few years, we'll have positive stories to tell, particularly the health sector. Hospitals that have been built, and there are Nigerians in the diaspora. Right here in Abuja, we have maybe about 5. They're coming to build these hospitals, populate them, and then they come from time to time, spend a few months, go back, consult and all that. So really, I'm sure that when we move on, we're going to be a destination for medical tourism.
Look to bring back all of the talented and educated and experienced doctors and nurses around the world, in the U.S., London, and other places, to bring them home and to help us as we seek to treat Nigeria as well as the West African sub-region and the areas of cancer, cardiovascular disease, and hematological diseases. Nigeria is fortunate to have many very good hospitals that are general in nature. We have chosen to invest in a very large hospital, ultimately 500 beds, that will focus on what we saw as gaps in the care, and that is specifically in cancer and cardiovascular disease.
Also on the subject of medical brain drain, it is the view of the interventional cardio-nephrologist, Dr. Olurotimi Badero, that brain drain in Nigeria's medical sector may seem like a challenge, but if government can improve the sector enough to attract back home doctors who travel to develop themselves, the country will benefit from migration. He was speaking with Channels Television's anchor, Ijeoma Onyato, where he says investing in medical technology will facilitate prompt intervention and better results.
So you have to equip yourself to be able to fight something. And if in Africa, we don't have the technology, even though we have the brain, I think we have the brain power, but we don't have the technology, we don't have the, just getting the knowledge that we need outside of what entails in Nigeria and Africa. You need to go get that knowledge to develop yourself so you can come back and use the knowledge to develop your country. So in a sense, it's good for people to go out and learn what they have to learn. So now the onus is on everybody, the government and also the people, to find a way to bring people back. You have to attract people because there's freedom of speech and freedom of movement. People can move whatever they want to move. The question is you have to create an environment that's going to make the brain come back with the knowledge, with the expertise to develop your country.
Well, let's take you back to talking about events at Davos following the meeting of world leaders at the World Economic Forum. Our partners, Deutsche Welle, that is DW, had a strong presence there as we hook up with Lars Holter from Berlin. Hi, Lars, good to see you. Talk to us about the week. Who was or who wasn't there?
question. Honestly, the guest list was not as impressive as it has been in previous years. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz was there, and he was indeed the only leader of a G7 member. And then South Korea's president was there as the only other G20 leader. So that's a lot less than we have seen in previous years. There was no President Biden. There was no Xi Jinping. There was no head of state from Britain, France, Japan, Australia. You had your global organizations, of course, NATO, the EU, the World Health Organization, but just some of the big shots were missing. Two countries that had a fairly strong presence, South Africa and India, both there for some higher level talks because they were out there to specifically attract a foreign investment in their countries and work on trade and global partnerships.
Money and investment in Davos. Didn't the meeting always try to send a larger message?
Yeah, they always tried. Davos was always trying to convince people that world leaders could meet there to change the world for the better, improve cooperation, to tackle, let's say, just the world's biggest problems. But let's have a look at those problems. For example, there's inequality. The NGO Oxfam prepares a report every year to publish the day before the World Economic Forum opens, and they did so once again this year. And it clearly shows again that global inequality is only getting worse. Once again this year, the rich have become richer, the poor have become poorer. Just last year, 2/3 of all the new wealth created in the world went to the top 1%. And the billionaires, here's a number for you, the billionaires' wealth was growing by $2.7 billion every day. And that, of course, against the backdrop of tragic poverty in many parts of the world. Also look at climate change. For years, NGOs and activists have come to Davos to try to convince politicians and business leaders to change course and increase their efforts to save the climate, get off fossil fuels, invest in alternative energies. And where do we stand today? The situation for the climate is arguably worse than ever before. And it, interesting enough, it even shows in Davos, where in the midst of the Swiss Alps, there was hardly any snow until just a couple of days before the meeting. So it's almost like nature wanted to send world leaders here a sign. So it does turn out to come back to the question here that it really is all about money, because businesses have not taken the radical steps that they have always been discussing and that they have been promising to take. I saw a banner flying from a Davos balcony. It said, "So this is what corruption looks like." And I guess that's definitely what a lot of people think of the World Economic Forum in Davos.
And Lars, were there any new topics on the agenda this year?
Yes, there was considerable talk about women. Again, this is a part of Davos' general agenda to strive for equality. Here, in this case, of course, gender equality. There's an equality lounge in Davos this year where many have went to hear about and discuss initiatives to promote women in leadership positions, politically and in business, but also where they talk about how to improve women's standing in some parts of the world where their basic human rights are under threat, like Iran, for example, or Afghanistan. Also, a whole different matter, AI is a huge topic, artificial intelligence. Very recently, of course, we saw the emergence of a new AI chat program, ChatGPT, that has driven everybody crazy in the last couple of weeks. And of course, lots of people are worried about how it will impact our life. Seems like a classic Davos topic to discuss. But to be really clear here, over the years, Davos has always been a lot of talk and results are not guaranteed.
Lars Holter from Deutsche Welle, thanks for that update. Well, let's go over to Georgia, where a Georgian man who killed 5 people, including a police officer, after opening fire from the balcony of a residential building, then turned his gun on himself. According to the Georgian Interior Ministry, the motive for the shooting in the town of Sagarejo, east of the capital, Tbilisi, was not clear. Additional police teams were mobilized at the scene of the incident, as well as a special unit of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Upon their arrival, the accused person allegedly committed suicide with a firearm. That's according to the ministry. Georgian media identified the shooter as a former Georgian soldier who had served in the country's contingent in Afghanistan. And in the United States, President Joe Biden has said that he has no regrets about his handling of classified documents found at his home and former office, and that he believes the matter will be resolved. Attorney General Merrick Garland last week named a special counsel to investigate the matter after classified documents were found at Mr. Biden's Wilmington, Delaware home and a Washington, D.C. office he used before becoming president. Mr. Biden added he has been doing as instructed by his lawyers after a handful of documents were found in the wrong place. He said the documents were immediately turned over to the National Archives after they were found.
You know, I will answer the question, but here's the deal. You know, what quite frankly bugs me is that we have a serious problem here we're talking about what's going on, and the American people don't quite understand why you don't ask me questions about that. As we found a handful of documents were filed in the wrong place. We immediately turned them over to the archives and the Justice Department. We're fully cooperating, looking forward to getting this resolved quickly. I think you're going to find there's nothing there. I have no regrets. I'm following what the lawyers have told me they want me to do. It's exactly what we're doing. There's no there.
U.S. President Joe Biden. In the meantime, reports say the White House is scrambling to catch up to the classified documents controversy and to blunt a Republican effort to pin down President Joe Biden and get former President Donald Trump off the hook in his own secret records drama. Well, our Washington, D.C. correspondent Maria Bird joins me now for more. Hi, Maria. Does it appear to you that the White House has largely been on the defensive since the initial revelations March 9 that the documents had been discovered?
Well, you know, you bring up a very key point here, and I think the president's yesterday speaking out on this issue was the first time we really heard what you might consider to be a bit defensive. The reality is there has been very limited communication from the White House since this was found, and obviously, as you stated, early November is when the classified documents were first identified. And so I think the question is going to be, how will the White House respond? Will Congress, will Republicans be able to get it so that the president will potentially have to testify on regarding these documents, and will they ever become something that is brought up and brought to the light of the public as to the exact types of documents that were classified that he had in his office? And so I do think it's very interesting to see how he will handle this. As we know, this is a very prime time for the Democratic Party as they prepare to identify who will be running and if the president will be running for re-election.
And when he says, you know, he's doing as his lawyers has said in terms of what the White House is doing about it, what does that entail?
Well, the lawyers have been the ones that have been dealing with this matter from the beginning, and we're just now recently kind of seeing some more communication, especially from the president in this regard. The lawyers are working with the special counsel on this. They're working with the Department of Justice on this, and they're the ones leading kind of the steps into how they, you know, are searching for documents, looking to identify documents, and any further investigation that will be held in this regard.
So speak to us about the difference of both the Biden and the Trump classified document revelations.
Well, when you talk about the Trump's revelation of the documents, you're talking about far more documents, number one. You're talking about, I think, what has been expressed as an intentional or noted moving of documents into the Trump home, whereas what we're hearing as far as the President Biden is concerned, is that this was unintentional, and the number of documents are far less. And so I think that that's really where the difference is, but I think we really won't know the full essence of the difference until the full investigation is done by the special counsel to look at the types of documents and to see if it's at the level of confidentiality as those Trump documents were.
So as of now, we do not know the exact content of the documents.
No, we know the general nature of them, but not the specific content, and that's what the special counsel has been assigned to do further research on.
Some have said that the cases involving the Trump and Biden documents doesn't highlight the urgent and the long overdue need for perhaps an overhaul of the U.S. system for protecting classified presidential records. What are you hearing from experts?
That I think is very clear that that has been expressed. The experts are also saying they're not sure if these documents being classified or released would have necessarily changed anything major for the U.S. And I think that's really the concern is, did it express any type of confidential information that could have put the U.S. at risk for foreign adversaries or things of that nature? And was there information there that could have actually put the U.S. in danger? And I think that's really where where you're hearing that it's not as if these documents, the releasing of them, is something that should be of great concern to the American people. But obviously, we also know that the former Trump administration has expressed their interest in running for re-election. And so at the time, and we were in the midst of January 6th hearings, at the time, many Democrats were going to definitely push forward to try to request that those documents were reviewed.
Talk to us about the U.S. debt ceiling. It's an issue likely to cause more rift between the Democrats and Republicans. Has there been any agreement?
Yes, this is, there's a very limited and short period of time that the U.S. has to be able to address this debt ceiling issue. It's the real way that most are stating that will have limited impact on the U.S. as if there is an agreement to increase the debt ceiling. Unfortunately, we know right now Democrats and Republicans have a very different opinion on the increase of the debt ceiling. It's also been very clear that the Republicans are looking to actually cut down on spending in the U.S., and so it's highly unlikely they will want to increase the debt ceiling. So we are potentially looking at continued and further economic impact and a U.S. economy that is going to continue to suffer.
And, well, perhaps apart from this, what else has the president been up to? I know that Thursday he was scheduled to visit California with all of the floods and the damage that has caused.
Yeah, so he's obviously working very closely on that. We're in the midst of the infrastructure announcements that he has made and kind of how we're 2 years in of the anniversary of that, what is being done as far as the infrastructure in the U.S., who, as you mentioned, he was visiting California because we're dealing with major catastrophic weather conditions, and we really are not prepared from an infrastructure perspective to manage through some of the changing in the climate in the U.S. So that is one of the big things he'll be continuing to look into over these next couple of days.
Maria, thanks a lot. Well, let's head to China now, where, according to a vlogger, Western countries are displaying double standards and hypocrisy by imposing restrictions on travelers from China, despite Omicron variants being prevalent across Europe and Asia, which makes the move political and not science-based. China has made an array of active adjustments in its COVID response, ranging from 20 measures in November, 10 new measures in December, and downgrading COVID-19 management measures. British vlogger Jason Lightfoot, who has lived in China for more than 10 years, has observed commercial activity returning to normal in recent weeks. As China lifted travel restrictions and resumed international flights earlier this month as a further step to refine its COVID-19 response, Chinese tourists have started journeys to global destinations. But some countries, including the US, Japan, South Korea, and several in Europe, have imposed additional border rules only on passengers from the Chinese mainland, ranging from testing requirements, mask mandates, to suspension of short-term visas, citing a possible infection surge and potential new variants.
Western countries, and some in Asia as well, and European countries, the UK and America, they've decided to impose restrictions on people traveling from China. In the UK, COVID is everywhere. It's the exact same thing. It's Omicron variant, or maybe some sub-variant, but it's mostly the same. It's the same in the US. It's already teeming with COVID. In Europe too, it's the same. And some Asian countries, it's the same. They've already got COVID there. They've already got Omicron variants, just like what's in China. So it's really ridiculous that they're saying, oh, Chinese must have a test. What's the point? You've already got COVID in your country. It's not based on science. It's just based on politics, really. If you were to tune into Western media during the past 3 years when China's zero COVID policy was in place, you know, there would be story after story, negative stories about China's zero COVID policy, saying, oh, they should stop the lockdowns, they should stop the quarantine, they should let Chinese people travel abroad and be free, let the Chinese people free, right? But now that China's zero COVID policy has ended, and now suddenly all these Western countries and the Western media, we don't want Chinese people coming in. No, you need to do tests, put restrictions on Chinese people. You know, they're just hypocrites.
Well, that is one opinion on the travel restrictions to Chinese citizens. Well, let's head to South Korea now, where hundreds of people have had to be evacuated after a fire broke out in a shanty town in South Korea's capital, Seoul. Roughly 60 homes are reported to have been destroyed in this morning's blaze in Guryong village. There have been no reports of deaths or injuries. South Korean media has described the area of closely packed makeshift homes as the capital's last remaining slum. It took more than 900 firefighters and several helicopters 5 hours to put out the blaze. President Yoon Suk-yeol called for all-out efforts to minimize the damage and mobilize all available firefighters and equipment, according to his spokeswoman. Mr. Yoon is currently in Switzerland for the last day of the World Economic Forum Summit at Davos. Well, the exact cause of the blaze is still unknown, but the area has also been prone to fires and floods, with many homes built using cardboard and wood. According to the Korea Times, Guryong village has suffered at least 16 fires since 2009. Coming up next. It's been referred to as a bizarre cloud formation over Turkish sky, and it has staggered viewers. We'll bring you more when we return. And a bizarre cloud formation staggered residents in the Turkish city of Bursa, and this happened yesterday after the circular UFO-like cloud covered the sky in the early morning hours. The surreal sight has gone viral on social media as the sunrise shifted the colors of the massive cloud from orange to red and to yellow. The country's meteorological directorate told local media that the peculiar formation was an example of lens clouds, which are generally formed as a result of strong wind fluctuations over hills and mountains. Eyewitnesses said the shape remained intact for about an hour before disappearing from the sky. That's just amazing. Well, that's our program today. Thank you for watching. I'm Melissa Mtwanwaka.